Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Homero Suarez, and this is Lucelma Canales, and we are your friendly coaches. She is the data coach, and I'm the administrative coach. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about different aspects of achieving the dream. It's titled, what is the title? Building a Culture of Evidence. And a number of these things I think you're aware of, but we want to refresh people's memories. And if those of you that are not aware of achieving the dream, we'd like to introduce that to you as well. Lucelma, being the data coach, will walk us through this. I will participate as well. And then we ask you to participate by asking questions and making observations. So, Lucelma?
Thank you, Mero. Do we just kind of want to get a sense of who's in the room? So I will start like in church, like the priest always calls out the person in the end, right? No, I'm just kidding. So, hi. Hi. Do you want to kind of your name and the area that you represent?
I'm Susan Polk, and I teach in developmental communications.
Han, or IT.
Thank you.
Ludi, Dean of Student Services.
Dennis, Director of Financial Aid.
Mary Lou, Financial Aid Supervisor.
Joe Ramirez, VP Student Services.
Sherry Loper, counselor.
Joshua Beck, Clerical Counseling.
Mi Chong Park, Counselor.
Diana Bonilla, counselor.
Cindy Lewis from ESL.
Okay, so y'all notice that that's my Texas. So you notice that the title is a little different. And the reason the title is a little different is that it's also about building a culture of inquiry and evidence. So the inquiry piece is how do we get to where we ask smarter questions about the data and how do we engage differently with the data. And so this is kind of, there's a small group of us, so I want us to participate in a little discussion about where you believe your institution is when it comes to building a culture of evidence. So at the institutional level and at a project level, either with your Achieving the Dream initiatives or any initiatives that you might have. So if I come in brand new into your college and I say, where are you in the process of implementing a culture of evidence at the institutional level? Where would you say? Anyone? Okay.
We at the institutional level, we have a lot of data for the college, but the question is how do we use this and how we sit down, take a look at that. Probably we still on the progress of trying to achieve in there. I didn't say that we don't do it, but we try to do it, that we want to. Yeah, and I believe, as long as we settle down with the IR office and then with the leadership commitment, I think the faculty and staff right now, we all looking at how do we, blending, even though the planning, evaluation, decision making, you have to base on the data. Okay. And I'm very sure in another year to come back, probably the college change, I believe.
Good. You heard that? When we come back next year, the college is going to be completely changed in the way that they're using data. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what data is routinely shared with faculty and staff. What kind of data do you all routinely share or is shared with you?
In our unit review, we can have information about student success in courses within, from semester to semester, retention and that sort of thing. That's available through our unit review.
Okay. Anyone else? What about in student affairs? What about in student services? What kind of data do you routinely look at or is shared with you?
We use student learning outcome surveys, which students fill on their own. It's a self-selection process.
Okay. And so what do you do with the data?
We compile them into spreadsheets. We add them to our program review every year.
Okay. Anyone else? So then what tools, such as dashboards, scorecards, data briefs, reports, do you currently have access to?
Currently, usually when faculty asking for data, they email me, and I just run a report to provide them with data like student success or retention rate, or any specific data about Parks, Professor Parks. She asked me about the ESL student, the cohort of 7. Let's see how the percentage of their completion, the sequence of the ESL, and that's pretty good. And then also on the website, we have a certain interactive report, which is attached to the database behind. So faculty and staff can look at that report instantly, look at the enrollment level, the FTE generation, and look at the grade distribution, student success. Yeah. So all the basic data we have available on the internet.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, what challenges currently exist?
But this is my opinion. So okay, the challenges I can see how do we engage faculty and staff using the evidence, using the data for the improvement. And improvement is not just a semester or year or the wait for something happening. Something we have to think about, change the culture, change the way we think. Continuous improvement, that's what we're looking for. But that's a challenge, we don't have it.
So does everyone pretty much agree with that? That kind of is where you are? And so that's why you're in Achieving the Dream School. And this isn't unique to LA Mission. This is where we all are across the country. We all have some data. We collect it. We use it for program review. But our accrediting boards are holding us a lot more accountable. So then we need to move from, okay, so we collected it, we have it, so what? What do we do with that data? And so I'm going to take you on a little journey about student success. So first, I'm going to kind of lay the framework for you. It's really important for us to understand that this isn't a California problem. This isn't an LA Mission problem. This is a national problem. And it's not just community colleges. So what do we know about student success? We know that half of the students across the country, half of the students seeking an associate's degree require remediation. But guess what? Our four-year institutions, almost 21% of them, students need, and they hide them really well, right? They tell us they don't exist, they don't do dev ed, they just call it something else. But this is a national problem, so it's not just a community college problem. Then, remedial students are less likely to graduate. So a student seeking a one-year certificate, and according to IPEDS, we should be done in a year and a half, right, for a one-year certificate. Only 22% of all students finish. But if you start in developmental studies, you're less likely to complete a certificate. 2 years associate's degree in 3 years, 13%, 9%. So you already begin to see the disparities on whether you come in college prepared or not. And then 4-year degrees, the same thing. So this really is not just a community college problem. This is a higher ed problem. And all of this data, by the way, if you go to Complete College America, you can get your data for California also. So Complete College America. Then they get to us, and they're kind of swirling. How many of you have heard of the swirling effect of our students? They have no direction. They're kind of taking whatever they can. And so in most institutions across the country, a certificate that students should finish with 30 credits, most students who graduate with a certificate accrue 63 credits. Might as well have finished an associate's degree, right? And this isn't including their credits for developmental. This is college credits. Then, associate's degree students are graduating with 79 on average. And look at with the university. So many states are now implementing policies, and financial aid folks, this impacts you. This is why the new federal guidelines and new state guidelines have gone in place. In Texas, students now have to pay out-of-state tuition. And so all of this affects. So more and more folks are saying that that's why the feds in the states are kind of getting on us and saying, get a student on an academic plan as quickly as possible. And that doesn't mean get them to declare a major. It means get them on an academic plan that they stick to. If you look at what Valencia Community College is doing with their life map, students can't register for anything that's not on their academic plan without seeing an advisor or counselor. If you look what Sinclair Community College is doing, the same thing. And those folks are showing that their data is moving. And more or less and less kids are transferring with excess credits. So this is still at the national level. This is just another perspective of it. So if you're a full-time student or a part-time student, you know, and this data doesn't look any different than your data, and we're going to show you your scorecard in a little bit. So if you're getting an associate's degree, it's taking full-time students almost 4 years. And this is very generous data. Your data is actually in California is a little different to this. Okay, any questions, reactions? Does this surprise anybody? Is this kind of what you thought? And who can remember when 25% of our students were non-traditional students? This is what our universities think, right? And it's really not. Now, 75% of students enrolled in higher education, not just community colleges, in higher education are non-traditional students that are juggling a home life, work, students, and more since the economy took a dip, more and more of them are also from low-income communities. So here's another look at that. How many of you have seen this? Out of 100 students who start kindergarten, depending on what group they come from, if it's a Caucasian student, 94 finish high school, 66 some college, 34 a 4-year degree. Now let's go to the African American students, 89, 51, and 18. If you're a Hispanic student in this country, only 10, less than 10% of them will ever finish a 4-year degree. This tells a very different story about what's happening. The fact that we're enrolling more African American and Latino students does not tell us that they're finishing at the same rate. That's why disaggregating data is so important. A question was asked earlier, but we're 70-some% Hispanic. Well, then you need to be disaggregating the data on other ways. Because guess what? In this country, 9%, only 9% of the students that finish a 4-year degree by age of 24 are low-income students. This is a crisis, especially in today's society. So if you're not looking at your students based on socioeconomic status, and this is where financial aid, you can contribute so much to the discussion about what kind of data do you have about your students that can help further inform this. Can you imagine? We haven't moved the needle in this country at all between the haves and the have-nots. And so this is a very telling data, and it's a very current data. Any surprises with this? So it's no longer just a gap between ethnicities. There's a huge gaps depending on where you live, you know, and your family background. So if we only focus on high school students, we're never going to close the gap. And your data, when we look at your scorecard, your older students are actually outperforming your younger students. And to some respect, in some of your indicators that we looked in earlier, your less prepared students are outperforming some of your more prepared students. So you have to, that is what I want to see. I want to see, like, really? Why? You know, and you have to ask yourself those questions. So along comes Achieving the Dream, right? In 2004, and they said this is no longer acceptable in this country. We have to close the achievement gap amongst groups of students. And we have to have courage. We have to have some courageous conversations about the data and what it means. And we need to check the egos at the door. And I heard this amazing quote, and I told Clark that I was going to quote him. In one of my Illinois colleges on Friday, there was this really powerful statement by an African-American faculty member at Elgin, and he said to us, I had to check my cynicism at the door. Because for many, many years, we've been looking at student success, but I've just been here too long, been there, done that. I see diversity programs, I see this, I see that. But he said, I'm committing. I'm checking my cynicism at the door, and I'm going to give it a good old college try. I'm going to just work on this and be part of these working groups and really embrace that if we do this the right way, we're going to impact student success. I thought that was really powerful, coming from someone who kind of has not had a good experience at looking at student success in the past. And so Achieving the Dream came aboard, and they talk about the need to change the community college experience by turning stories of access into stories of success. So most of our funding throughout, higher ed has always been about get them in the door, At least in Texas, we by the 12th class day, that's who you get funded on. To now, people are beginning to talk about performance-based. How many are still in there, at the end of the semester? How many are still there at 30 credits? How many are still there by degree completion? How many are making progress? And Achieving the Dream has a goal of really helping all students, especially low income and students of color, catch up with everyone else. And I'm going to tell you something. In the last year that I've been kind of working with different colleges, including my own, there's something going on with our Hispanic students that are enrolling. In many of our colleges, they're beginning to turn the tide, and actually they're outperforming everyone. And so I have a theory about TRIO programs that I need to test, but I'm not sure. And the kind of support that they're giving students. I don't know if you can see that. That's supposed to be a map of the U.S., but just pretend Florida's over there, Texas is right here, you're over here, you're right here. And so this is kind of to show you where Achieving the Dream is currently. And as you can tell, this is you all, is it down here? See? Yeah, so that's where you guys are, and there's a cluster of colleges that kind of came in together. So it's over 100 and some colleges that are in this business right now. So when Achieving the Dream was founded, it really was founded based on these 3 pillars. You had to be student-centered. We have to stop blaming the victim. Our students are not broken. So it's really about reflecting and turning the mirror on ourselves and saying, what is it about our systems and processes that are not equipped to support non-traditional students? What is it about us that we can't successfully help students navigate? And then equity. How would you all define equity? Anyone want to be courageous and define equity for me? Based on what you, okay.
Equity, I can tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean one size fits all, that no 2 students are alike, that student A and student B come from very different life circumstances, and as a result, what works for student A may not work for student B. Right. And so we have to be able to level the playing field in a way that services both kinds of students so that they're successful.
Do we all agree with that? Okay, so many of us grew up, I'm going to tell my age again, 60s and 70s and 80s, when equity was about treating everyone the same, right? Every campus has a TRIO program. Every campus has advising. Every campus, has developmental studies. Every student must go through 3 levels, whatever it is. Equity is really about meeting students where they are. This is the example that we use. So let's pretend we're in an emergency room, and in comes somebody with a broken arm. Yeah, we're going to provide that patient the best care that we can. But in I come with a heart attack, who's going to get more attention and quicker and more services? We are going to have to treat the heart attack much quicker than we do someone with a broken arm. The same thing. I think about myself, migrant farm worker. I lived the life of a migrant farm worker. I would leave deep South Texas in March, and I worked out in the fields March through the entire summer. I went to as many as 3 or 4 schools in Washington and Oregon, went back home in October. I knew nothing about going to college. My father has a 3rd grade education from Mexico. My mother has a high school diploma. Neither of them went to college. They couldn't help me. So now I needed a very different experience than, now consider my kids. I've got a PhD. I've gone through 3 universities. I hope I know financial aid, although I still can't fill out a FAFSA without the help of the director of financial aid, who I kind of pull into my office and say, help me. But my kids have taken 0 access credits. My kids each have a degree plan. My kids will go bug the advisor every semester. And by the way, my daughter went to the program chair and said, you know, I love organic chemistry, but that professor is so brilliant, he can't speak to us at our level. My child is an advocate for herself, something I couldn't be for myself. So my children require something different than someone from the colonias who has two parents who don't have a college education or don't know how to navigate, and so, or someone from very low income, single household. So I don't expect my kids to have the same kind of service that I would have needed. So that's equity. It's about meeting students where they are. And then a culture of inquiry, evidence, and accountability. It's not just about having the data. It's not just about analyzing it. It's about acting on it. It's about creating a safe zone where you can fail and it's okay. You can learn from your failures. You try something, you try it, you evaluate it, and isn't that what accreditation requires? Right? You have to have evidence that you've done something, it didn't work, or it did work, we're going to scale it up. It didn't work, we're going to try and tweak it based on evidence, research-based programs that are out there and research. Does this make sense? I know that you all have heard this before. We're trying to kind of just set the foundation again. Okay, 4 levers. So these are the 4 levers that Achieving the Dream promotes. Improving results at institutions, influencing public policy, and in that we would say institutional policies also. It doesn't make us any good if we do something and we never change the policies to fix them. And then generating knowledge. This is what this is about. We're trying to create knowledge about student success and then engaging the public. How does your institution engage with the public sector? With the community businesses, with K through 12, with others. So these are the things that Achieving the Dream tells us. So if you think about it, nowhere have I said Achieving the Dream is about projects. Nowhere, right? Or interventions. It's really a framework for improving student success. So what's a culture of evidence? It's collecting and analyzing data to improve student outcomes at the institution, program, and faculty and staff level. It's about strong evaluation components. And this isn't about faculty evaluations. This is about programmatic and institutional evaluation. Okay? So here they are side by side. The 5 principles, committed leadership, and then I'm going to break this down in a little bit. Use of evidence to improve programs and services, broad engagement. So we look around the room and it's always the same people, right? So how do we broaden that? How do we reach out and take everyone? Research tells us that if you can engage at least 60% of the college and bring them on board, that's your tipping point. Doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. And as a matter of fact, we don't want everyone to agree with us because those are the people that keep us honest. They'll ask the hard questions. But it is about getting a great majority of folks involved. It's about systemic institutional improvement. It's not about pockets of excellence anymore. Our resources are not there for that. And then equity. And those are the 5 steps that we use. Commit to doing it. Use data and prioritize for actions. Engage stakeholders. Implement, evaluate, and improve. And establish a culture of continuous improvement with the goal of increasing student success and completion. So it's just a process. That's all ATD is. It's a process. It's a framework. Any questions, comments? So committee. It's not just about your president, although research done by MDRC of the original Round 1 and Round 2 colleges shows that strong presidential commitment is really important. Strong VP commitment is really important. Dean, program chair, and faculty. And in a highly unionized and collective bargaining state, like in Illinois, like in California and others, it's really important that all political structures are included and involved. But if you take it this here, It's not just about policies, but it's about how we use our resources. If I go into an Achieving the Dream school that's been in Achieving the Dream for 8 years and I see no change in the way that they're budgeting, I'm concerned. Because you really should see things being, kind of reallocated in a way, unless they were already doing a masterful job with their budget. And so all of those things, you have to have the courage to do resource reallocations also. Step 2, you can't look at everything. But whatever you look at, you need to look at longitudinal student cohort data. And we sent you all a little report that kind of talks about cohort tracking that Rick Voorhees put together. And by the way, it's a really good article that kind of tells you what data elements you should be looking at. So most folks will tell you 3 years is a good start. 5 years, you can determine if you're still on the same trend. It's a good kind of year to look at. That's why Achieving the Dream will ask you at minimum for 3 years, but they really would like for you to use 5 years of data. Because you want to be able to know that it's still working. And then engaging stakeholders. Engaging faculty, staff, and other internal and external stakeholders. We can't do this alone. Academic affairs, we used to call this, we got to bust those silos. So how do you begin to create cross-divisional talks? ESL and developmental shouldn't be looking at underprepared students on their own, because the real success of those programs is that the student completes the first credit course, English, math, whatever it is. And then it's got to be a cycle. And I think you're going to hear this from your accreditation group. They're going to come back and say, close the loop. What's the feedback? So what? What next? And those are the kinds of questions that you have to ask yourself. So how do you put in place a process of continuous improvement? Which is that piece of it. And ATD has a really nice model that kind of just tells a really good picture, right? It's a good picture for those of us who are visual of this is the cycle of how anyone that is starting a new program, that is starting a new service, this is a one kind of shot look at it to say, okay, here's where we are. Let's pretend you've got a task force. The work begins. What happens there is that group should be saying, what data do we currently have to inform the working group? What don't we have? What data do we need to collect? What do we need to analyze? Then you set priorities. We can't do everything. So what can we do? And then you develop your strategies, you implement, you evaluate, and you institutionalize, right? A lot of us start projects and it's like, oh, it's working really well in 2 sections. Okay. If those 2 sections are outperforming everything else, what's your plan to scale up? And there's a really good article called Some to Most that talks about how you intentionally scale up programs that work. So in Achieving the Dream, these are the priorities that they're looking at. Everything from participation, who's enrolling, because we're open access colleges. And I know in California you all are kind of maxed out on some of the sections and you kind of have some capacity in that. But then also retention. And retention is term to term. Well, first is course completion, right? You have to keep them in the course. You have to keep them semester to semester and then year to year. And then progression of developmental studies. Nobody comes to higher ed for dev ed. They really don't. It's about getting them to their first credit course as quickly as possible. That's the real measure of success. If you look at the work that Tom Bailey, Davis Jenkins, and all of that group has done at CCRC, Columbia Community College Research Center, in Columbia University, they tell you that the faster that a kid gets their first academic credit, the more apt they are to stay with you and to complete. And, by the way, English and math are the 2 greatest predictors. And then degree completion and transfer success. So now I'm going to show you what your institution is held accountable to in your scorecards. Do those look familiar to you all? Right? So in California, this is what you guys are being held accountable for. Do you want to talk about these? So persistence in college from year to year, completion of 30 units, completion of degrees, well, I'm not going to read it to you, remediation, remedial progress, and career and technical progress. Have you all seen your data? No. Okay, so let me shift a little bit. So this is your scoreboard, your scorecard. So this is what your community college district has for you. And see how they have the different tabs? This is open to the public. This is straight off of the internet, right? So this is the demographics of your students. So you pretty much are like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. You know, the majority of your students are 20 and older. So only 1/4 of your students are coming to you straight out of high school. You're 72% Hispanic. You're about what the rest of the country is, 60% female, 39% male. Pretty much that doesn't look any different than anyone else. So now let's look at your persistence numbers. So if your students come to you college prepared, only 46% of them, and let's look at the definition. This is your cohort through 6 years, still still enrolled, and they took 3 consecutive terms. This isn't what you would expect to see. You would traditionally expect to see that your prepared students, your college-ready students, would be enrolled consecutively for more than 3 terms in a 6-year period. But somehow your unprepared students are progressing at a stronger rate in 3 consecutive semesters. So then, yeah, that's what this data is supposed to do. So you're supposed to say, why? What additional data? So then, now let's look at, is there additional data that you can look at? So what's going on? This is about disaggregation now, right? Guess what? Your under 20 students that are college prepared, if I just look at this, they're lost. They have no plan. They're kind of meandering. They're not staying with you 3 terms at a time. So you have to ask why. Your older students, you must be doing a little bit better with them. So your unprepared students, you're 25 to 49, 69, almost 70% of them. That's a pretty good rate if you think about it. Imagine pulling a group from those students and interviewing them through a focus group or something, saying, talk to us about your experience. I'm wondering if you separated this, would these be your career and technical students that have a better plan? Would they be your level 1 certificates? Would they be, you don't know. Those are the kinds of questions in a culture of evidence that you would be asking. What do we know and what don't we know about these students? But imagine if you just had the top numbers. That really doesn't tell you a story. So in a college that implements a culture of evidence, you'd be asking why, where, what else don't I know? You know, and so does this surprise you guys? Had you all seen this data before? Okay. So this Texan girl came and showed the California, you know, and it's just open to you. You know, and that's what I mean about it's not just data to be out there. They want you to use it.
I just want to say to the college, the last week I make on the slideshow on the main page, I did the website link. You see that, right? Yes, yeah, it's from the last week. So hopefully that you can click on that and then go straight direct to the web page here. Okay. Yeah, we did.
You can see every community college in the state, because it's a statewide initiative that the state chancellor's office put out. So every community college, you can see their scorecard. The reason for the scorecard is for students to shop. That is the reason, and they've stated that, that if they want to find the college that has the best achievement rates, they can go take a look to see, and you know, within their travel area. So that's part of the reason why they put the scorecard out throughout California.
Look at this other interesting point. So if a Hispanic student comes in college ready, 46% of them do 3 consecutive semesters. But if they come in not college ready, 58%. You have to ask yourself what kind of resources are non-college ready students getting. So you're doing something well. So what do you learn from that? Do you have more barriers, policy, flags, anything that help you control what these guys are doing versus these guys over here? And so that's when you begin to look at the picture a little differently, right? So you're like, okay, now let's talk about your students in 30 units. However, they eventually do accrue more credits quicker. So it's not just about looking at it from one view, right? And so if they are college ready, they are 62% of them accrue 30 credits, but within 6 years. Yeah. You know, so imagine localized. Shouldn't you be asking yourself within 2 years, within 3 years? Okay, so at least you know the data is there. It's about running it in different ways. And here's your data on completion. This is the rest of the way the rest of the country looks. So if you're college ready, you're more apt to finish within 6 years. Personally, I think 6 years is way too long to look at. You should be looking at 150% of the time the way iPEDS looks at it. Because I bet you if you were only looking at 150%, this would be more in your 40s or 50s. It would not be 73. Okay? And so I'm very careful when people say, oh, but Complete College America, it's presented, it's part of branding, it's part of telling a story in a different way. So but it is consistent. If you were underprepared, that would be more probably like 12% or under 10%, depending on your completion rates. But also, if you break it down, something good is happening with your 20 to 24 and your 25 to 49-year-olds. You're doing something really well with them. You've got to try and find out what's happening with them. You know, if you map out their student experience, what would it look like? Does it look the same for college-ready versus non-college ready students? And then here's your remediation. This is also, I'm sorry, I can't move it, but their CSL is 2.2%. 21% for math and 27%. But this is within 6 years. I still would contend that 6 years is way too much. But this is what the state has. So even if you only had this data, it's good data. You should be able to engage a group of people to have a dialogue around this data. You know, and you really should. A lot of colleges do, during college-wide days, they have data summits, you know, based on clusters of groups. They have others call them data digs based on discipline and what would be of interest to people. The cool thing is if you could get cross-divisional discussions on it. Get staff and faculty to talk about it, because the financial aid and admissions folks can add value to what the faculty are talking about. And so this is some additional, yes ma'am.
Can you pull it back down? What, I just wanted to see it.
The definition?
Yeah.
6 years.
So are these students,
I'm sorry.
so are these students that have identified themselves as having the goal of completing or transferring? Or,
That's a question that I would ask whoever.
so if, like, for example, for ESL students, if they're coming here to learn English and may not have the goal of transferring or completing, are they part of that little 2%?
Let's see. Cohort student who's obtaining an outcome. Cohort has no. So this is a question that you have to ask. I don't know your data. And so there's, but your system office or your district office should have the operational definitions for this. And those are good questions. You need to ask that. Is dual credit included? Is it not? Are part-time students included? Are they not? So those are all very, I would almost tell you that these are all first-time, full-time, and college students. Because a lot of folks, that's the definition that they use to create cohorts. But that would be my guess. I haven't really, I mean, I discovered this because Homero said, oh, look, Lucelma, these guys have a scorecard. And I'm like, well, we can use it to do show and tell, during one of the sessions. And then here's your career and technical. Also over 6 years. What I would like to see, and I don't know, maybe you all can request this from your state, is how does it differ between certificate and associate's degree? AAS versus level 1 certificates. This is what I'm finding, which is really concerning to me. This is the second college where I see this. Males and females start with the females ahead, but almost 57% of the males are finishing quicker than the females. In one of the colleges that I just came from, we saw that half of the students they're finishing their developmental studies at the same rate, the males and the females, but 73% of the males that finish the developmental sequence right away finish their first academic credit course. Only 23% of their females. And it's being skewed, they're white females are not progressing immediately. So that either means there's anxiety or life is getting in the way. They have to kind of figure out what's happening. So this is the second college that I see where that trend is a bit concerning to me. Because something is happening, and it would be concerning whether it was whatever group it is. Okay. Do you all have career and technical programs with your school districts? Dual credit? Yeah, and so that might be why the under 20 is a little high. And so, I mean, data tells a story, and you kind of have to ask yourself, what story is this data telling me? What piece of the story, right? Okay, so that being told, any reactions, anyone? Okay. Now I'm going to kind of walk you through. Did you have? Yes.
So, when we're looking at that age group and the people that were 20 and over up to about 50, it seems like they fared better. Is there any studies or any data that shows maybe once I'm a little bit more serious with life and school is very high priority for me, I have tendency to pursue and go on?
So if you had a task force or a working group or your data team looking at this, my question to them would be, so what does the research say about that population? And if I separate the transfer programs versus the career and technical programs, is that skewing my data? You know what I mean? And so those are the kinds, like your culinary arts program probably has very high success rates. Is that skewing? So you kind of also have to take out the outliers. Your worst performing and your highest performing, just like with anything else. So to answer your question, it depends on the region also. There are some regions, like in Deep South Texas, where the under 20 are outperforming because they've got like hundreds of thousands of students in early college, high schools, finishing, so it just depends.
I think that what some of the scorecard information tells us, and especially since we're looking at a 6-year period of time, is that we have taken a snapshot of what we are not doing. And part of what we're not doing is that we're not encouraging students to complete within a certain amount of time. Having been a community college student in 1971, got out at Moore Park College in 2 years. And I was no smarter. In fact, I was probably less smarter than the students are right now. And somewhere between 73 and 2013, we've put obstacles in front of our students, whether at their high school and their disconnect, or whether they're here at the campus. I didn't have 6 to 8 math courses to take in 1971. We didn't have certain things that we had to do, but we were able to complete. So I think that we have to take a look at that data. Why exactly are we saying it's okay for 6 years? And Dennis and I have conversations about financial aid, because students need to know now that they have a window to be allocated financial aid. So our job in student services is going to really be to educate students about how much time they have to receive financial aid, because some students will no longer go. I mean, they'll use it because they can spend 6 years here and use up all the Pell Grant, and they have none for the transfer, right? So those are things that I think if we look at the scorecard, that this is the first time that we're really taking a look, being serious about it, because we've been more prosperous over the years. We're not as prosperous right now.
I mean, and that's really what all of this is supposed to help you do. So we kind of have set the foundation, you know, and the state is pretty much taking you in that way. And I mean, in Texas, we're already looking at about 10% of our funding being tied to performance, you know, and they've set up very similar metrics to yours. So let me give you an example of why it is so important to disaggregate data. So this is real data from a college that was applying for Leader College designation last year. And so when you look at this, it looks like there's nothing happening, right? It's probably all because the Hawthorne effect. Somebody turned on a light and a student got a little better, you know, or somebody shifted something. So it's really important to dig deeper, though, because when I unpack this data and the college looked at it, look at what they've been able to do. They have now closed the gap between African American and Hispanic students. Do you see? There was a 5-point difference here, down to 1-point difference. That's substantial, you know, over that period of time. Now we have to ask ourselves across the country, I'm not sure what's happening with our Caucasian students, but they kind of have stayed stagnant. So there's something happening where if you look at, this college must have been purposefully trying to really support the African American students, because they had an 8-point increase in fall to spring persistence. So if I go back to the other slide, it showed like they were flatlined. This college would not be celebrating that they've done some good work with fall to spring persistence. By unpacking the data, they can now tell. Now imagine if they did it by gender. And by the way, when they do it by gender, both genders are moving forward. You know, and so those are the kinds of really important stuff to look at. Now let me show you the fall to fall. So what this tells me, it's not by accident. They are doing something to support their African American students, because they had a 7% increase in persistence. And this college could probably be a model. They're not a predominantly Hispanic, they're not an HSI, but they do have about 30% Hispanic, but they're not an HSI because they don't have them as full-time students. They're FTEs, they don't meet the definition for an HSI. But, I mean, that's pretty good, you know, when you look at what they're doing. And this college could probably, if they unpack their student experience, could probably teach the rest of us what's going on with their Hispanic population. We're seeing this trend in the college in Illinois that I visited last week. And I have a theory that, and they kind of confirmed a little bit of it, that we do such a good job promoting TRIO programs to our Latino students. What we're finding is some of our African American students do not go to TRIO as much. In this college I went to in Illinois last week, they did focus groups. The African American students didn't know that they could enroll in TRIO programs also. They thought it was a Hispanic thing. And so I mean, there's things that you can then ask. What is it that you're doing well with a particular group of students? Okay, so that's one story. Now, let me show you another story. So this college is an early 2004 Achieving the Dream college. They eliminated late registration the first year that they joined Achieving the Dream. And this is the data that they used. So this college wanted to look at late registration because faculty kept saying, if you would get students into my classroom on the first day of class, we would make them successful. So we said, okay, if we're going to take this serious, we have some data that shows that students are not doing well if they don't come to class the first day of class, right? So this is what their data looked like. In the fall of 2004, they had 800 students who registered late. Okay? That was all, 4.5% of their total population. 84% of them paid and stayed enrolled. 16% of the late registrants were dropped for non-payment. First red flag, 4% of the entire student body that registered on time were dropped for non-payment. So if students register late, and it's all about behavior, right? And so if they registered late, they were 4 times more likely to not even pay or show up. First red flag. So remember, we're telling a story because we have to look at multiple sides. Then we said, okay, so how did they do at the end of the fall? Half of them did well, the other half didn't. So what do we do with that? Do we eliminate late registration with just that data? If we take this to the board, they're going to say, wait a minute, why are you going to hurt half of the students? They're doing well, right? So I would say we can't make a decision yet. Then you add some additional data. However, students who register late, 192 of those earned 0. Whoa, I'm sitting in the room where these decisions are being made. And that's kind of what the Dean of Nursing and Allied Health said. She stood up and she said, I don't know about you people, we don't let our students come in late. So, you're setting them up to fail. Financial aid implications, all kinds of implications. So now, do we eliminate late registration? So the VP of Student Affairs came prepared and the Director of IR with data that showed, we'll scale it back. We'll go from 3 days to 2 days to 1 day. The Dean of Nursing stands up and said, you're hurting students. They eliminated late registration in October. And they started enrollment for the spring in the middle of October. They had 2 weeks to develop a communication plan to tell students, we're eliminating late registration, and by the way, this time we mean it. And come up with a plan not to lose students. So, did you see how many layers this college had to go through to make a good decision? This is what a culture of evidence looks like. It's to what point? Now, we could have gone over and over and over and kind of looked at the heartstrings. But at some point, we're practitioners. We have to make a decision. We have to have courage. We have to change policies and processes. So I share these 2 examples of to show you ways that you can't just look at the highest level of data.
And because we know this to be true, LACCD is at the right time to eliminate late registration because students are registering and filling classes, for the most part, before the first day of classes. And it's something that we really, really have to think about because we do have the heartstrings are pulled, and we have students I just need and financial aid. Okay, you sign off on it, but we are hurting students, and I think we really have to take a look at what we do with late registration.
So here you have a methodology, if we can call it that, of how you could look at, well, what do we know about our students who register late? And make an informed decision, And if you can't right now, then you look at the next term where you actually can do it. So here's just another way. We all, just like our students, we all have different learning styles, right? Some of us are like bullet people. Some of us are table people. No, bullet people, that sounded wrong. Some of our are chart people, right? Well, this was another way to show it. If you registered late, you were 2 to 3 times more likely to get a DFWRI. So this is just another way to show it. It's, so I'm giving you kind of tools that people use to tell a story in a room of 20, 30 people that are decision makers that are going to make a decision that is going to impact their students and perhaps their budget. And so it's important that people have a good view. So here's another way to show it. And this made it real obvious, right? Look at the Fs for the late registrants. So this tells a story for me, who I'm a visual. I'm like, just show me the table. Just show me. It's so obvious to me right there. Look at the Ws. They're not only holding up seats, but they're withdrawing. So they're not paying, they held up a seat. They're withdrawing, they held up a seat. And students who really wanted to finish can't. And so this kind of is another way. These are, by the way, this is the actual material that we used in a meeting to make these decisions. I'm not making any of it up. So did it make a difference? These same students, the very next fall, when they were forced to register on time, their grades went up. They went like 60%, so like 11, 12 points. 11% of them more got an A, B, or C. Their DFWs went down. So what this says, if you read all the literature about academic behaviors, that if you force students to do things, students don't do optional, right? If you force them to register on time, it does have an impact. Now imagine that even before starting Achieving the Dream, this is the planning year, we eliminate late registration. That's a great way to bring faculty on board. Because they're saying, what do they say all the time? Administration only cares about enrollment. Administration only cares about enrollment. Well, this meant we care about student success. So, and the data showed that the right decision was made. So what does this mean? What did we learn? Data is the key, but drilling down is really important. Or as a good friend of mine would say, unpeel that onion, Lucelma. Let's see what's in the core. Let's look at what's in the middle. And then multiple looks at the data. If you just look at one, that doesn't tell you the whole story. And then cross-divisional dialogue. You know, student affairs cannot make that decision on their own, or academic affairs, because you don't know the financial aid implications. So you've got to kind of have everyone. You've got to have your scheduler on board, because it's going to impact that. A communication plan, we've got to make sure that the students know. And then institutionalization through policies and business processes. Because what would have happened if we would have eliminated it the next fall and then we didn't really put it into the calendar? And the next fall, we've got late registration again, right? So you need to make sure that all of that is done. Any comments, observations, questions? Okay. And then I know that Ken did some training for you guys on focus groups, but I'm just going to kind of go real quickly. Because that's all quantitative data, right? Quantitative data doesn't tell us anything except we have a problem. It's like, Houston, we've got a problem. So how do you dig into what the problem is? Qualitative data, right? Focus groups, interviews, other things. These are the kinds of qualitative processes that you can use. Colleges, other Achieving the Dream colleges have used focus groups, personal interviews with students, faculty, and staff, essays in your orientation courses, and then you kind of do an analysis of the essays. Open-ended question and current surveys that you do so that you don't survey overload the students, right? And then others. You might have faculty and staff that are working on theses, that are working on dissertations, that may be interested in doing some of this work. Of course, they couldn't share it with you until after they finish and defend, and so, this is a model and theory that Dr. Raymond Padilla and Dr. Kenny Gonzalez, who was your original data coach, kind of put together. So you know this. Students come into our system with a goal in mind. Some don't complete their goal, others do. The difference between the two, and I did my dissertation using this methodology, is that students who come in, and if we teach them how to navigate, they will make it through. If they don't have the skills or abilities, they won't. This is a theory of knowledge. I don't know if Ken shared this one with you all, but these are the 3 types of knowledge that students need to be successful. So they need academic knowledge. We all know that, right? They need heuristic knowledge, which is experiential knowledge on how do they succeed in our process, and then combine. What the research that Padilla and them did was showed that this how to navigate your system is so much more important the first term early in their career with us. My dissertation actually showed that by the time they get to us, it's too late, especially for low-income first-generation students. That's why partnerships with high schools or with adult basic ed programs is so critical, because if they don't have the college knowledge piece, we're almost setting them up to fail. That's where college success courses, or I think you all call them PD courses, are becoming really critical. And that's just the framework for if you choose to do like your barrier studies. So these are questions that we have to ask ourselves. Are barriers that different for students who are successful versus not? You know, and what the research tells us is that it is. I will tell you that I've done in my old institution, we did 25 focus groups. It's a large institution every 2 years. We did them three times, so we have 6 years or 6 years worth of data. What we found in the focus groups was students who successfully navigate could tell you concrete. I went to the PASS program. I went to financial aid. I registered on time. I went to the library, to the reserve area where the PASS program has books, you know, that they have on loan. Things like that, they could tell you. The students that are in Dev Ed, the most at-risk students that were in our college success course would tell you, I have to try a little harder. I have to work a little harder. It was almost like they were listening to the coach in high school, you know, but they couldn't tell you what they could really do to be successful. So it really validated for us that support services before and during were really important. And all of that to say, guys, it's still about the student. We can't get so hard that we don't stay student focused. So data driven, student focused. And for the adult basic ed student, the ESL student, it's about aligning programs, accelerating time to completion, providing comprehensive services, and ensuring labor market payouts. All of this research has been done by Jobs for the Future, which is probably why your CTE students are doing well. And then collaborations. This is part of another presentation that I did. So, my question to you at LA Mission is, what will success look like for you? And you don't need to answer it right now. But you have to ask yourself, what will success look like for us? You know? And as my good friend, the new president of El Paso Community College, William Serrata, would say, and if you think you're there, then we don't belong in higher ed anymore. Because he always says, my goal is 100% student success. And we're like, really? He goes, whose kid am I going to tell that they're not important? So the goal should be that all of our students, right, we may never get there, but it's a goal. And then, how will you tell your story of student success? Homero and I can go tell this is what they're doing, this is the great work, but how are you going to tell your story? Within your college, within your state, and then to the rest of the country. It's important that you guys ask these because it's also about the journey that we take. And we've got to celebrate the good things that we're doing. And bottom line, this isn't a surprise to you all. The economic future, to a great extent, is going to be influenced by our ability to increase educational levels and competitive workforce skills of all the residents in our community. And so, reactions. I hope that Homero and I have left you with a lot of things to think about. You know, because this isn't just about academic affairs or student affairs. This is about the entire pipeline of your students. And there's some good things happening within your data. You need to learn what's working well and how do you scale that up. Homero, do you?
You did an excellent job. Let's give her a round of applause. It's all about data, you know, and I go back to what I said earlier. You need to ensure that you have a good research office, that it produces quality data, and that it is used. I think that last part is a missing element, is that a lot of data is produced that is not necessarily used by people across the campus. Faculty, staff, administration need to be reviewing data on a minimum of once a year, by discipline, by department, by division, so that you know what type of students you have and how they are progressing in their chosen careers. So I think it's important to use it. And I think that last part, most institutions cannot answer affirmatively to that they use the data on a regular basis. They just can't say yes to that because it's not being done. I think it's a new day where data drives almost everything that we are doing. All you have to do is look at the student success agenda that California has adopted, the legislature. Everything is going to be measured, and everyone is going to be asked to go through a certain path. They choose certain things, but a lot of it is going to be dictated to them. But it's going to be tracked. It's going to be measured, and if you don't meet the standard, many students are going to be told go to the back of the line, or don't even come back. I mean, they'll run out of financial aid or whatever the case might be. So, developing a culture of evidence is extremely important. I hope that you develop a good research office, and I hope that you all insist on reviewing numbers on a regular basis, whatever that might be. So, thank you very much. Yes, questions?
Without going into too much detail about TRIO programs, and that you were seeing success of students that came from TRIO programs.
No, I said that's a theory I have.
Okay. Let me explain a little bit about Upward Bound program, which is a big push for low-income, first-generation students working, because what they do is what you've talked about, and they've been held accountable. They have to hold, if they write a proposal, say 80% of our students are going to transfer to a 2-year, 4-year institution. They have to complete high school, and they have the resources for 60 to 100 students that provide them from grade 9 through 12. So by the time they finish going through the 12th grade, they've already had the orientations. They've already had the counseling. They already know about financial aid. Their parents have been talked to. They've got the culture already and the commitment. This is why, the program has been so successful, and they're held accountable because they don't get continued funding if they don't meet their goals. And funding's tied to that. So, I think that's a model. When I first entered the community college, I saw community college as a big Upward Bound program because a majority of our students are first-generation low-income students. And we've not done the job to provide those resources or do the kind of support services that gets our student population to matriculate through from first year to AA transfer.
So that's a theory that I have. TRIO programs, of course, have been criticized for the small numbers, but I believe that there's something to learn from them. AVID, the same thing. So wouldn't it be interesting to do focus groups with your successful students and find out what kind of college knowledge building activities, and not ask them the question, what kind of knowledge building activities did you have, but what helped you learn? What experience did you have in middle school, in high school? What programs were you a part of? Because we don't want to influence their discussions, but this may be part of what you look at in some of your focus groups.
I think that you bring up an issue that needs to be discussed a bit further, because a lot of these so-called boutique programs are small in scale. They serve very few people, and there are resources that are provided to them so that they can get the students through the system. But we don't always have the data to really look at to determine what is their real success rate. We believe that they are successful, but we're not absolutely sure. So I would argue, let's look at the data to see what really happened. For example, the AVID program that you mentioned, that is touted as a very successful program, whatever we want to call it. But the real numbers might suggest, according to some researchers, might suggest something else, that it's not as successful as people think it is. So I'm always one of those that likes to look at the numbers to really determine, as opposed to taking a strong position on something based upon limited information. So show me the numbers, and if they're overwhelming and they are successful, then we should maybe replicate that more. And again, the big issue or the big concern is scale. These boutique programs or serve small groups of people, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of other people that need assistance as well. So how do we scale up that good work that is being done?
And do you want to mention that report and that we'll make it available through
Okay.
the ATD coaches, the ATD co-leads?
Yeah, there's, which is the one, oh, here, this is the one that has the,
Yeah, 5 minutes.
there's a report that was issued by the research group in California. And I shared it with Diana. And it basically indicates the 6 success factors that students have identified. This group went out and interviewed 900 students across California at 13 different community colleges. And they concentrated on trying to find African American and Latino students. And it was biased a bit in that direction because they really wanted to look at minority students. And they interviewed these folks, and these students identified 6 factors that they believe are absolutely necessary in order for them to be successful in college. And so they basically, and let me share this with you. This report will be available to anybody who's interested. But the first word that they identified is that they need to be directed. These are students saying, we need to be directed. And by that they mean students have a goal and know how to achieve it. The second word they identified was focused. We need to be focused. Students stay on track, keeping their eyes on the prize. So they need professional people like yourselves to keep them focused. They need to be nurtured. Students feel somebody wants and helps them to succeed. So that human touch that needs to be provided by faculty and counseling staff. And then engaged. Students actively participate in class and extracurricular activities. And connected. Students feel like they are part of the college community. And then finally, valued. Students' skills, talents, abilities, and experiences are recognized. They have opportunities to contribute on campus and feel their contributions are appreciated. So these are the 6 success factors that the research group in California has identified. Am I burping or is something going on? No. I know. Yes.
When I took a break earlier, I went to check my email. Our peak group was in on that same presentation that Cindy and I went to about a month or so ago. And I want to say it's at East, but I've already sent Diana the link to it. Hopefully quite a few people in this room can go to it. That would be very beneficial.
Do you want to add to it?
Dialogue.
Great. I think so. You want to add to it? Oh, yeah. Well, Stephanie and I went in February to it, and they're repeating it because it was so popular. So I think it's in the middle of May sometime. I think it is at East. It's somewhere close by. So.
Anything you'd like to share about it?
Well, they took their information from surveying. We have, when we do focus groups, we talk to a few people on our campus, and they did, like I said, 900 students all over the whole of California. They did telephone surveys and they did focus groups and got a lot of information from students of what they identify as what they need to succeed. Yeah.
But I think what I would convey is focus on the words. And they're very much like, the words that they have identified are very much like what Achieving the Dream is asking people to consider. Accreditation dictates are also asking people to look at this. The student success agenda that the state has handed down are very similar to these types of things. Students need to be directed. They need to have orientation. They need to have an educational plan. They need to be placed according to their skill levels, and then they need to be given opportunities to be successful, i.e. enhanced tutoring in the English and math areas and other areas. So it's all very similar language, but the direction is all the same. Yes.
I wanted to add, I guess in listening to what everything that the student is saying that they need, the ELPNS program, and you're probably familiar with it, Extended Opportunity Program and Services, is a state-funded program here in California only, so I don't know you've heard of it, EOPS. And that program provides absolutely everything that is described by what the need is. Throughout the whole state of California, the programs have demonstrated throughout 40 years the success of the underrepresented student. And I guess I speak for the numbers here at our campus. It's very consistent in terms of how we graduate the students. And we keep on wondering, how does this happen with only the two counselors that we have? And I think it's because all of the different, I guess the different sections of the different things that we do, like we go out of our way to do orientations. We almost take them by the hand to do special tutoring. We really listen to what the student needs and then go out of our way to do it. We provide workshops. We really encourage them. So we take them on trips when possible. When there was more funding, we would do that more. So again, I guess the key factor is how could we, I guess, get the funding to provide that type of service? Well, we already know that that's something very, very productive and it's a good program.
Something that I would say is in a time of limited resources, maybe the question instead of how do we get the funding is what's the tipping point? So what is the right number? So if you use that model and say, oh, we meet with the students once a month, well, what if you can't meet with every student once a month? What's the right amount of time? Or which student groups need once a month? Which ones may need more? And then who can do it? Is it only the responsibility of counseling? Is it only the responsibility of? So you kind of, that's why I'm working with this little West Texas, Northwest Texas College, Vernon. It's tiny rural college. And they're actually going to go through a process this summer where they're going to map the student experience. And they're going to see where are the touch points. You know, so if let's say you map out the student experience for your EOPS students, and then just a student that's on its own, or a student that's in another one of your programs, and what's that tipping point? Because you're not going to be able to do it for all students. I think, Jenna,
I think an interesting duality or dilemma that California is facing is the idea that the counselors and the counseling profession is heading for extinction, and that counselors are, because of the numbers that we have to serve, now the state is going to be looking towards paraprofessionals and advisors. That's why the faculty discipline advisor model is very palatable for our state and other community colleges. And so there's this fear-based feeling of we're trying to push out counselors and make them non-existent because the idea is anybody can do counseling. But that's not really the case from a practitioner's point of view, that not everybody can do counseling, nor is it a field that everybody should be getting themselves into.
And I'm going to give it to you. So then the question becomes, is everything counseling? So you've got academic advising, you have course scheduling. So should counselors who are very high-level people who are trained to deal with serious issues, should most of their time be tied up doing course scheduling? Or, so it's really about thinking through. There's some colleges in Illinois, highly unionized. Their counselors are all faculty, very similar to you all. They're rethinking that because with 3 counselors, they can't do, and in their contracts, it says that only counselors can do advising. So what they had to rethink is, for example, they have now trained faculty to do course scheduling. It's not advising, it's course scheduling. So you have to think, what does it mean to be a counselor? And does it, so it's only discussions that you can have as a campus.
I agree with those observations. I think that the time has arrived because of limited resources that you start, not you particularly, but the counseling profession not be so defensive and look at it more constructively and basically say, okay, we can do X, Y, and Z, and we can allow some of these responsibilities that we've had, we can let professional advisors take care of that. So that might be an approach, at least to discuss. Yes.
I wanted to piggyback off of what Ludi was saying in regards to ELPS. The data does show that programs like that are very structured and have check objectives that they have to meet. The students do tend to do better. But I think we're at that place, and we always talk about the lack of resources. A lot of things can be done without money. We already do them. We have a schedule. Of course, we have limited sections, but we do have a schedule. What do we know about learning communities? 2 faculty sitting down together, looking at their syllabus and seeing how they can work together to help the student get through 2 courses and doing some of the work or similar work, you know, writing 1 paper that covers 2 different areas. So I think as an institution, we have to move to that place where it's not always about the money. It's about how can we take, and if you have a population of 200-300 students, can we add another 100-200 students to that each year? And like Romero said, you know, we won't be able to hit every single student, but what are some of the positive points from your program that can be duplicated and tried with the general population? So I think that's kind of where we need to move.
Resources will continue to be an issue, especially in California, and I would predict across the country. And so we're going to have to look at how we can serve students better. And the other thing is that, you know, community colleges, our mission is changing. Would anyone disagree with that? Our mission is changing because the legislature is dictating that we do not do certain things anymore, and that we only focus on those things that are going to allow students to get a career or get through the system to transfer. And so they're really going to start dictating based upon who gets the money and who doesn't get the money. So we need to maybe be ahead of that and look at things from a different point of view. Interesting times that we live in. We have another group that we need to go talk to, so thank you very much, and we'll see you around.